In 2014, the world wrote India off as a nation of slums and call centers. By 2024, it became the fifth largest economy on Earth. But here's what no one's telling you about how they did it, and why it might not last. If you've ever felt like your circumstances define your future, this story will shatter everything you believe about transformation. But before we dive in, if you're new here, hit the subscribe button and leave a comment. I subscribe, and I'll personally welcome you into the family. With that said, let's get started. Let's go back to 2013. India had more people without electricity than the entire population of the United States. 270 million Indians were living in darkness. Meet Rajesh Kumar, 42 years old, textile worker in Mumbai. He lived in an 80-square-foot room with his wife, 3 kids, and his mother. That's smaller than most people's bathrooms. He earned $2 a day. No bank account, no savings, no safety net. He told reporters in 2014, "I thought my children would inherit my poverty. That's just how it works for people like us." The World Bank's 2013 report confirmed Rajesh wasn't alone. 270 million Indians, 21.9% of the population, lived on less than $1.90 a day. Imagine the heat of Mumbai in summer, the smell of open sewers, the crushing weight of knowing that no matter how hard you work, the system keeps you invisible. But in Rajesh's pocket was something that would change everything, and he didn't even know it yet. While the world was obsessing over China's rise and America's politics, India did something no country in history had ever attempted. They weaponized technology against poverty itself. Here's the stat that made economists question their own data. Between 2014 and 2023, India lifted 415 million people out of poverty. That's more than the entire population of the United States. The UN called it the fastest mass poverty reduction in recorded history. How? In 2016, Rajesh got his first smartphone, just a basic model. But that phone connected him to a banking system that didn't exist before. The government opened a free bank account for him. No minimum balance, no fees. They called it Jan Dhan Yojana. Suddenly, government assistance that used to disappear into the pockets of corrupt middlemen went directly into Rajesh's account. Digital transfers, trackable, uncorruptible. Within 2 years, his savings grew from $0 to $800. His family got cooking gas subsidies. His kids got scholarship money for school. All through that phone. But here's where it gets even more incredible. The government launched something called Aadhaar, a biometric ID system. Every citizen got a unique 12-digit number linked to their fingerprints and iris scans. 1.3 billion people, the largest biometric database ever created. Critics said it was impossible. Too many people, too much corruption. It would never work. By 2023, 1.36 billion Indians had Aadhaar cards. The system processed 8 billion authentications every month. Banks, hospitals, schools, government services, everything connected to one identity. No more fake names collecting benefits. No more ghost workers on government payrolls. No more middlemen stealing from the poor. The Oxford Poverty and Human Development Initiative couldn't believe the numbers. Their 2023 study showed India's multidimensional poverty dropped 50% in just 9 years. Imagine waking up one day and the system that kept you poor just disappeared. That's what happened to hundreds of millions of people. But money alone doesn't create power. What happened next shocked the entire world. Remember when Made in India was a punchline? When Indian workers were stereotyped as cheap labor for customer service calls? Not anymore. In 2024, Indian-born CEOs run Google, Microsoft, Adobe, IBM, YouTube, and dozens of other tech giants. They're not middle managers. They're making decisions that affect $8 trillion in combined market value. They control the platforms you use every single day. Sundar Pichai at Google, Satya Nadella at Microsoft, Shantanu Narayan at Adobe. Arvind Krishna at IBM, Neil Mohan at YouTube, Jayshree Ullal at Arista Networks. Ajay Banga led MasterCard and now runs the World Bank. This isn't coincidence. This is a pattern. But here's the story that hit me hardest. Meet Priya Sharma, 28 years old. From a village in Bihar, one of India's poorest states. Her parents couldn't read or write. They were farmers growing rice in fields their ancestors had worked for centuries. In 2018, the government's internet program reached her village, free Wi-Fi. Priya had never owned a computer, but she had that phone. She started watching YouTube tutorials on coding. At night, after working in the fields all day, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, Python, she learned it all for free. 6 months later, she built her first website for a local shop owner. He paid her $30, more money than she'd ever held at once. 1 year later, she was freelancing on Upwork, building websites for clients in Europe and America. Today, Priya earns $45,000 a year as a software developer for a company in Texas. She works from her village. She never left home, but her village left poverty. NASSCOM's 2024 report shows India's tech exports hit $194 billion, employing 5.4 million people. That's bigger than Pakistan's entire GDP. You can see the contrast on her street now. Bullock carts passing underneath 5G towers. Her neighbor still plows with oxen. She codes on a laptop. And here's what makes this even more insane. India didn't just create workers. They created an entire startup ecosystem. In 2023, India had 108 unicorns. Companies valued at over $1 billion. That's more than any country except the US and China. Companies like Flipkart, Paytm, Oda, Byju's, Zomato, built in India, funded by Indian entrepreneurs, serving Indian customers first, then expanding globally. The mentality shifted. For decades, talented Indians left for America. Now, they're staying home, or they're coming back. But there's a darker side to this boom that's making global powers nervous. China is watching. America is watching. And they're both scared. In 2022, India surpassed the United Kingdom as the world's 5th largest economy. The country that colonized India for 200 years, overtaken in a single generation. The IMF projects India will be 3rd by 2027, overtaking Japan and Germany. That's not just growth. That's a complete reshuffling of global power. Remember Rajesh, the textile worker earning $2 a day. His son is 19 now. He works at a Tata manufacturing plant making iPhones. Apple is moving production out of China and into India. 200,000 jobs created in 3 years. Tata, Foxconn, Pegatron. Massive factories employing hundreds of thousands. Rajesh told me, "My son assembles phones I couldn't afford to dream about. He makes more in a month than I made in a year back then." But it's not just phones. India became the world's 3rd largest automobile market. Companies like Tesla are building factories there. India produces more steel than Japan. More cement than the entire European Union. The pharmaceutical industry. India supplies 50% of the world's generic drugs. During COVID, when the world needed vaccines, India's Serum Institute produced billions of doses. But here's what really terrified the old superpowers. In August 2023, India became the 4th nation in history to land on the moon, and the first ever to land near the lunar South Pole, the most difficult landing zone attempted. The cost, $75 million. NASA's similar mission cost $432 million. India did it for 1/6 the price. How? Indian engineers used smaller rockets, lighter spacecraft, more efficient trajectories. They couldn't afford to waste money, so they got creative. They innovated out of necessity. Harvard Kennedy School released a study in 2024 titled Frugal Innovation: How India is Disrupting Global Power Dynamics. They argue that India's ability to achieve more with less is fundamentally challenging Western models of development. Then in 2024, India launched 36 satellites in a single rocket, setting a world record, and they're doing it commercially. Other countries pay India to launch their satellites because it's cheaper and just as reliable. The Indian Space Research Organization has a waiting list of customers: America, Europe, even China is watching nervously. If you think this is just about one country getting rich, you're missing the real story. The global economy is being rewritten. Supply chains are shifting. Tech leadership is shifting. Manufacturing is shifting. Even space exploration is shifting. Western companies spent decades building everything in China. One country, one government, too much risk. Now they're desperate to diversify. And India is the only country with the population, the infrastructure, and the political stability to absorb that shift. Tim Cook visited India 3 times in 2023 alone. He's never visited any country that many times in 1 year. Apple plans to produce 25% of all iPhones in India by 2025. Google is investing $10 billion in India. Amazon, another $26 billion. Microsoft, $5 billion. Every tech giant is betting billions on India's future. But there's something the headlines aren't showing you. And it's the crack in the foundation that could bring this whole miracle crashing down. Here's what they won't tell you in those triumphant documentaries. While poverty dropped dramatically, income inequality actually grew. The World Inequality Report 2024 found that India's top 1% now owns 40.1% of the country's wealth. The gap between rich and poor is wider than it was before the boom started. Meet Aisa Khan, 35 years old, garment worker in Bangalore, India's Silicon Valley. She works 12-hour shifts sewing clothes for international brands. From her factory window, she can see the glass offices of tech billionaires. She earns $180 a month. Her rent is $90. The rest goes to food and her daughter's school fees. There's nothing left. She told me, "We built the miracle. We stitch the clothes, we clean the offices, we deliver the food to their desks. But we can't afford to live in it. My daughter asks why we can't eat at the restaurants I walk past every day. What do I tell her?" Oxfam India's 2024 report drops a bomb. Despite all the GDP growth, 70% of Indians still earn less than $400 per month. The economy grew, but for most people, life is still brutally hard. Here's the uncomfortable truth. India created 2 economies. One for the educated, English-speaking, digitally connected minority. They're thriving, landing jobs at Google, starting companies, traveling the world. Then there's everyone else, 900 million people, working in agriculture, factory floors, construction sites, delivery services. They're better off than 2013. Sure, but they're watching the gap widen every single day. The ladder out of poverty exists, but it only has room for some people. The rest are left clinging to the bottom rungs, watching others climb above them. And here's what makes it worse. Housing prices in cities like Mumbai, Delhi, and Bangalore have skyrocketed. A small apartment in Mumbai costs more than a house in many American cities. Young professionals with good jobs can't afford to buy homes in the cities where they work. Healthcare remains a nightmare for most people. India spends just 3% of GDP on healthcare. The US spends 17%. If you get seriously sick and you're not wealthy, you're probably going bankrupt or dying. Sometimes both. Education is becoming a class barrier. Elite private schools cost thousands of dollars a year. Government schools are overcrowded and underfunded. If you're born poor, your chances of getting the education that leads to those tech jobs, almost zero. So is this a success story or a cautionary tale? The answer depends on what happens in the next 5 years. Because right now, India is at a crossroads. Right now, India is at a crossroads that will determine if this miracle survives or collapses. Challenge number 1. Youth unemployment. Despite all the economic growth, 42% of college graduates can't find jobs. The Center for Monitoring Indian Economy reported this in 2024. You have millions of educated young people with degrees, skills, and nowhere to go. They were promised that education would lift them up. They took out loans. Their families sacrificed everything to send them to college. And now they're unemployed or working jobs that don't require degrees. That's not just an economic problem. That's a social time bomb. Educated, angry, unemployed youth have toppled governments throughout history. Challenge number 2. Climate catastrophe. The NITI Aayog report projects that 600 million Indians will face extreme water stress by 2030. That's 6 years away. Droughts, failed crops, mass migration from rural areas to already overcrowded cities. Chennai, a city of 10 million, ran completely out of water in 2019. Trucks had to bring water in from hundreds of miles away. That's going to happen more often, to more cities. You can't build an economy when your people don't have water. You can't manufacture iPhones when your factories shut down because there's no water to cool the machinery. And it's getting hotter. India recorded its highest ever temperature in 2024. 52 degrees Celsius. That's 126 degrees Fahrenheit. At that temperature, humans can't survive outside for long. Work stops. Life stops. Challenge number 3. Social fracture. Pew Research's 2024 study shows religious polarization is increasing as the economy grows. When inequality rises, people look for scapegoats. Communities that coexisted for centuries are turning on each other. Hindu-Muslim tensions, caste conflicts, regional divisions. These aren't new problems, but economic stress makes them worse, much worse. In 2023, ethnic violence in Manipur killed over 200 people and displaced 60,000. In 2024, riots in several cities destroyed billions in property. Investors get nervous. Companies reconsider expansion plans. You can't sustain economic growth in a society tearing itself apart. Challenge number 4. Infrastructure collapse. Yes, India built impressive highways, airports, and metros in major cities. But the basic infrastructure most people rely on, it's crumbling. Power outages are still common. Water supply is unreliable. Sewage systems overflow. Traffic in major cities is apocalyptic. It can take 3 hours to travel 20 miles in Bangalore during rush hour. The World Bank estimates India needs to invest $4.5 trillion in infrastructure by 2040 just to keep up with growth. That's more than India's entire current GDP. And here's the big one. Challenge number 5. The jobs that AI is about to destroy. Remember all those call center jobs that started India's rise? AI is making them obsolete. ChatGPT can handle customer service better than humans. Cheaper, faster, 24/7. The coding jobs that lifted people like Priya. AI is learning to code. It's not perfect yet, but it's getting better fast. India's advantage was always cheap, educated labor. But what happens when labor becomes irrelevant? When AI can do the work for almost nothing? McKinsey's 2024 report estimates that AI could displace 30% of India's workforce by 2030. That's 140 million jobs. Gone. Rajesh, the textile worker who started the story. He runs a small business now. Employs 6 people. He's proof the dream is real. But listen to what he told me last month. My success feels fragile. One wrong policy, one drought, one riot in my neighborhood, and we're back to zero. I've tasted hope. Going back to poverty now would destroy me. India stands at 2 paths. One leads to continued rise. A future where it becomes the engine of global growth. Where hundreds of millions more escape poverty. where it models a new way for developing nations, where it becomes a true superpower, not through military might, but through innovation, resilience, and human capital. On this path, India solves the inequality problem, invests massively in healthcare and education, builds infrastructure for everyone, not just the elite, creates jobs faster than AI destroys them, manages water resources before crisis hits, strengthens social cohesion instead of letting it fracture. The other path leads to plateau or decline, where inequality crushes social cohesion, where climate change erases economic gains, where social tensions explode into violence, where the miracle stalls out halfway, leaving billions disappointed and angry. On this path, India becomes a cautionary tale, a warning about what happens when growth isn't inclusive, when technology advances but society fractures, when you build skyscrapers on cracked foundations. MIT economist Abhijit Banerjee, who won the Nobel Prize for his work on poverty, said this in 2024. India's next decade will determine if rapid growth can coexist with equity. If it can't, the growth won't survive. You cannot maintain a modern economy in a medieval society. This isn't just India's test, it's humanity's test. Because if India succeeds, it proves that 1 billion people can escape poverty in a single generation. That democracy can deliver prosperity as effectively as authoritarianism. That you don't need to be China to transform your nation. But if India fails, it suggests that rapid development always creates winners and losers. That inequality is the price of growth. That maybe there's no way to lift everyone at once. Every developing nation is watching. Nigeria, Indonesia, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Brazil, Egypt, they're all asking the same question. Can we do what India did? And the answer India gives over the next 5 years will shake the future of billions of people who aren't even Indian. From 270 million people in extreme poverty to moon missions in 10 years. From call centers to commanding Silicon Valley. From one of the poorest nations on earth to the 5th largest economy. India proved transformation is possible. That circumstances don't have to be destiny. That an entire nation can rewrite its story in a single generation. But 70% still struggle. The inequality gap widens every year. The challenges ahead might be bigger than the ones they've already overcome. And the world is watching to see if this rocket keeps rising or falls back to earth. If Rajesh can go from $2 a day to running his own business. If Priya can go from an illiterate farmer's daughter to a software developer earning American wages. If a nation can go from 270 million without electricity to launching rockets to the moon. What does that say about what's possible for the rest of us? Here's my question for you. Would you rather live in a country growing fast but unequally, or growing slowly but fairly? There's no right answer here. But your response reveals everything about what kind of world you want to build. Drop your answer in the comments. Let's see if we agree or clash. Because this debate isn't about India anymore. It's about all of us.